Hello, and welcome to True Horrors with Meg and Rachel. Every week, we discuss a horror film and the true stories that inspired, influenced, or bear striking resemblance to them. Be warned for spoilers and adult themes. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Meg.
And this is True Horrors.
What if I just started screaming? What if that's how I started this episode? Just screaming?
I would love that so much.
I mean, I just feel like it would be really upsetting to our viewers if or our listeners, if they turn it on and it's like, this is True Horrors. Ah!
You know, it's funny that you say that because, my favorite podcast that isn't ours is Behind the Bastards. And he does sometimes open by just screaming. And I think it's the funniest thing in the world. He always opens in a really messy way, but the screaming is always my favorite.
Something I say, which Rachel's heard a lot when I'm at the end of my rope, is that I'm going to scream like a pelican. Mm-hmm. And anyone who knows me out there is listening knows that sort of display of frustration is not something that's in my character, which is why it's funny that I'm just I'm going to scream like a pelican. And I said that at work and the administrative assistant was dying. She thought it was so funny. She was like, it's just the visual. And I'm like, that's why I say it, because it's the visual of how pelicans, everyone knows what I'm saying when I say I'm going to scream like a pelican. Mm-hmm. It hasn't happened yet, but we're all waiting. We're all waiting with bated breath. I feel it's important to tell you guys that this final episode had a rain delay. We're a baseball. I was going to say a baseball game in the 90s, but I forget that other baseball teams don't have roofs. So they still have rain delays. But yeah, I went to get my hair done and I got trapped on the other side of town because right now it's a flash flood here in Chicago. It's the end of June. So if you're thinking back when you're listening to this, oh yeah, it rained a lot. If you're in the Midwest, it's been raining a lot. Mm-hmm. So I don't have a car. I do Lyft and no one would pick me up. So I got done with my hair at noon and it took me 2 hours to get home because it was also raining so hard. I was trying to I also just want to give everyone the visual. I wore one of those shower caps because my hairdresser gave it to me to use when I use this special conditioner to keep my hair purple that she recommended. And I was like, I just dyed this. I just paid to dye this. And it's gonna run when it gets wet. And it's gonna run not a ton, but anyone who's dyed their hair knows it does the first time. If you dyed a natural color. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's not happening. So I put it in a ponytail and I put my shower cap on and I have no regrets at all.
I never did tell you, your hair does look very nice. It's a different purple than it was the first time.
Yes, she did undertones of a jam so that it will, because she said that you never know how it's going to fade. And it didn't fade bad. It was blue. Mm-hmm. But because I was going to have it for another 4 weeks than I did this time, there's a chance that blue would turn green. Gotcha. And so giving it a jam undertone, and I'm going to get that good conditioner, because I have dark hair, it can't ever be too purple. My hair just won't accept it the way someone who's blonde would. So I'm getting this really good conditioner for it. But yeah, I just was absolutely not. Anyone who's ever paid to get their hair dyed knows that I was not about to have it be ruined. The first step I stepped out, not that it is ruined, but I also was going to have dye all over my clothes. So anyway, this was rain delayed because of me, because of the rain, because of the flood. The streets of Chicago were flooded. I sent Rachel a picture and I was like, it's kind of, and then I stepped outside and looked at the side streets and they were completely flooded. The amount of times I got to a street and then had to backtrack because I was genuinely considering walking through the floodwaters. And then I was don't do that. Don't do it. Yes.
It's in the past now.
It was in the past now, but I felt giving a little bit of personal, when Rachel and I first started this podcast, we had debates about how much we just shoot the shit in the beginning and get right down into business. And I was very much the pro business category, which is the only time you'd ever say that about me. And it's a little political joke there for and that's it. Scene. No more podcast. But I do try. I want to balance that out, add a little bit of fun stuff for you guys, a little bit of that behind the scenes stuff. But this finale is a little different than our first one. We bit off a little bit more than we could chew. It was also before we had the very wonderful Matt sitting in on these podcasts, and I was trying in my new apartment to find a place with the acoustics. We're good. So I sat in my closet with my computer on like a chair for the 17 hours Rachael and I did that podcast. And there were points where we were like, this has gone on too long, but we're not even close to being done. Like we could feel the energy. Like it was just like, it was a bad scene. And I was just like in my closet, just like moved 2 chairs, folding chairs in there. It was a lot.
You got a phone call in the middle of it. Like it was like legitimately 4 hours because you got a phone call. I think it was like your sister or something. And she was like, why are you sitting in a closet? And I was there for the whole thing.
Yeah. And I just like, I'm not disconnecting Zoom and ending this recording. So we're just gonna have to cut Katie out. Like, I don't know what to tell you. It's like, why are you sitting in that closet? And I was just like, I
don't have time for this right now.
I can't even explain the backstory right now. But so for this one, we did one movie and one normal movie as opposed to doing a mini series and a 2-part movie all in one, because we were just really excited and really eager. And like, I've never listened, like I barely listened when we did our edit through, because I was just like, at certain points in it, I was just like, I know it's only the middle of the day, but you both should go to bed. Like, just go to bed and try again tomorrow, because this is a mess.
I listened to it a couple times, and I don't think it was that bad. It was okay.
The cut version was.
No, I know.
The other version, it was like, we used to joke about doing like, when the first podcast episode we did was like a tester of all of our equipment, and it's never aired. And we used to talk about doing like the unaired episode. It was the black and white version of Phantom of the Opera, Rachael. Mm-hmm. A Rachael pick.
No, I don't actually. I think it was just straight up the musical.
Was it just straight up the musical?
It was the musical, and then the story I told you was the sequel. I was like, I sat through this fucking sequel, Meg. Buckle up.
Right. So it was, we've always talked about unaired and then like uncut footage. Not that stuff though. Like there's nothing worthy of anything. And there's mostly just like us going on whatever. But this is the final episode. And all of that was to say, this is going to be shorter, but I do feel a little bit more like we can vibe a little bit, because the finale can be a little bit longer than the other ones. But we did a classic. We did one we both really like, which is how it ended up being picked for the finale. The final ones are really ones where we both have something we want to talk about with them. And they're ones that we, for whatever reason, both put them on our list. And then we're like, oh, well, then we'll just do that as a finale. My obligatory shout out to my uncle, who, when I asked for this movie, got me the entire box set with everyone, which is a very nice thing to do, but they're all terrible except the first one. And Rachael and I watched them all when we were roommates. Start to finish, every one of them. As far as the big franchises, this one, the quality drop is instantaneous.
It is. It's immediate.
I do really like the meta one though.
Yeah, that one's really good. Also, you still haven't said what the movie is. It's been a lot of build up to what the movie is.
I didn't say A Nightmare on Elm Street yet. No, I haven't said those words yet. What if I just never said them? What if I just never said?
I really kind of wanted to go on and on to see how long it would take, but
it's A Nightmare on Elm Street. That's what we did for the finale. Sometimes I accidentally say, like, I feel like whether or not I start the sentence off with the nightmare or a nightmare depends on whether my brain says Before Christmas or On Elm Street. So, and I didn't even watch that movie as a kid. I just like, it's just like my brain's just like Before Christmas.
Yep. It just like autofills.
I do really love This Is Halloween though, because that's how I feel about Halloween. So I do sing that basically starting October 1st until November. This is Halloween. And I do it like that. So A Nightmare on Elm Street, the OG, Wes Craven. We're big Wes Craven fans. At least I am. I love Scream.
Right.
I feel like just starting from the beginning, because I don't think this is one where there's a lot of like overarching thoughts.
No.
Like, because it's not controversial in any real way.
No.
Okay. Most iconic weapon?
Definitely.
Definitely, right? Like when he's building it in the beginning. First of all, he's already a sick motherfucker. But then the fact that he's like, I can't even use a normal knife. Like, because there's something that's also really grotesque about the fact that it's sort of like touching you. Like that's the thing, is it's like, it's weird. And they don't say that anything he did was sexual. They just say he was a child murderer, which is bad enough.
Right.
But like the fact that then his weapon is like sort of a hand, I'm like, I don't like any of that.
I did appreciate the craftsmanship, though. He definitely crafted those out of love.
Do you think he had a dream about them? Do you think it's like a dream within? Like he saw them in a dream and then was like, all right. This movie is so the 80s. I just wrote, oh, the 80s.
Yeah, for real.
Can we talk about the acting in this movie and just the decisions? Because I love this movie, but the acting in it is, you can't even really blame the 80s. Like, I'm like, was it supposed to be really campy? Because like Nancy's pretty over the top. And so is like, she just is. And like, it doesn't ruin it for me, but I'm sort of like, there were some real choices made with her character and the way that she delivers her lines that have to be decisions. Like at some point someone could have been like, no, but they played it that way. And it just doesn't feel as grounded in reality as like, oh my God, I cannot think of her name, but the actress from Halloween.
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Jamie Lee Curtis feels very much like a person you would meet on the street.
Do you think it's because it's a story about someone who kills you in your dreams? They were like, we don't need it to be grounded in reality because it's very much not.
I mentioned in my notes that the fact that he killed you in your dreams allows this movie to do things that would be really unscary, but they're scary because they're saying it's the dream world. So it's what happens like, yes. And so they're able to do that. So I don't know.
Like when he jumped out from behind that tree, that tiny ass tree, like a Bugs Bunny cartoon, like.
Or when his arms were just really long. I just have to say, Freddy Krueger is having more fun than any other murderer. He's doing what he loves. Sure. He's living his bliss. He's deading his bliss, whatever. But like, it's not even just that he's killing. It's that, no, I wrote this in my notes. Hold on, where is it? Because I knew I wasn't going to remember his name when the time comes.
Michael England.
Yes. Wait, is it Michael? I know it's England.
Robert England?
Robert England.
There we go. I knew it was a generic name.
If it wasn't him, it wouldn't be as good. He creates Freddy with an amount. It's like a dream in the sense that it's scary, but also when you try to describe it, you don't know why. Or it doesn't sound as scary. Like Freddy doesn't sound as scary when you're talking about him and the things he does, but there's something so sinister about him. Like,
I disagree, because let's describe the things that he does. He chops off his own fingers. I think he cut his own chest open at one point. And also, he's coming at you with finger knives, Meg. That's terrifying, even just saying it.
I guess you're right. I guess I'm thinking more of like when he's like, haha, my arms are so long, and then like doesn't shrink them. Or when he like, yes. Or the way he runs. Like that's like a real choice, the way he runs after them. And I'm like, oh, this is fun for him. Like he's just doing what he does, which is murder children.
Yes.
But yeah, I do think that the dream element really helps.
And that's why, like, this has always been the thing that scared me most. We talked about this with body snatchers. Like, I don't like things that get you when you can't really fight them. I hate it so much. And then again, the fact that it operates on dream logic, because like they'll run away from him and then he just suddenly appears in front of them because it's a dream. And I hate it so much.
Well, I wrote this, and I know this sort of gets to our middle thing, but I would 100% be dead in this movie. Any movie that being awake is something like, I'm so tired all the time. But when I am tired, like I was never an all-nighter person. Mm-hmm. I have one time in my life pulled an all-nighter at a party. That was it. Like I'm just not that person. I need my sleep and I know that about myself. Like I'd have been like, what the fuck? Like, let's just end this because like I wouldn't be able to stay awake the way she does. Like I just wouldn't. Like it just wouldn't happen. I'm so sleepy. Talking about it makes me so sleepy. I know.
Also, that brings up the irony of the fact that when I was watching this movie, I was so sleepy and really, really wanted to take a nap the whole time. And they just kept talking about being tired, and that didn't help. And I did take a nap after this movie was over.
I just yawned, and don't cut that. Like let them hear that this talking about this is making me yawn. Oh, can we talk? Let's go back to the beginning. Okay. So Tina, they're here for Tina. Tina seems to be doing just fine. She's like, can you guys stay here while I have sex with my ill-advised boyfriend?
Way too loud.
Oh, I think you're saying I was too loud. But yes, way too loud. Way too loud. Like, it's so uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And I know they're trying to establish the idea that, like, quote unquote, like Nancy's a good girl.
Right.
But like, she could have at least like slept on the couch while her boyfriend slept on the floor. Like she kind of made him stay there and she could have at least like been in the same room. Like they wouldn't have, he seemed very respectful. It's not like they would have, but I just thought that was so like them separating. I'm like, they really have to go far to show you that like Nancy is the heroine, like because she won't even sleep in the same room as her boyfriend. Like I was like, knock it off. I was like, I don't care.
It's a bit much.
Also, I know it's a dream, but when Tina starts, like, she hears her name, so she follows it. I'm like, bitch, you don't know it's a dream at that point. Mm-hmm. So, like, why are you doing that? I don't know why Tina is following just because he's saying her name. Like, stay inside. Why are you doing this?
Is this the first dream she has?
No, the second because then she follows him out to an alley. And then he's just like fucking with her and then murders her.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm like, why? Why did you? But like, he just going, Tina. And I'm like, and she's like, who's out there? And I'm like, who the fuck cares?
The creep from your first dream who slashed your nightgown.
Even if it isn't a dream, why would you go out there? Like, why would you in the middle of the night, someone's calling your name? Nope, absolutely not. The silliness of the dream, we talked about that. The surrealness of the dream, and how everything's a little. I think that's it with the acting. Everything's a little bit surreal and a little bit like even the way the camera shoots, like it's a little bit surreal. Which he will eventually get to a point, Wes Craven, where he's dealing in like true, like I don't really know that I would consider Scream to be satire. I know people do. I think it's more like meta than anything else.
It's like that and an homage. And it's a lot of things, honestly. It's brilliant.
I love it.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Oh, when she pulls his face off. I'm surprised you didn't mention that in your horrifying thing. When she like peels his face off.
Honestly, I don't even remember that.
She's fighting him, Tina is, and then she reaches up and like he lets her because he knows what's going to happen. His skin's going to come off and it's going to be a more terrifying face below, not the red skull.
Not the red skull.
There is so much blood all the time, but also like the amount of blood these people have. I'm like, is that really the amount of blood? Like when he's got her up on the ceiling and stuff, I'm like, human bodies do not have that much blood.
That's exactly what I said. No, and then especially like jumping the gun. I was saying it repeatedly when Johnny Depp was a bloodbath.
Johnny Depp, because that's the only thing you think of, Johnny Depp.
Which every time he was kind of a dick throughout the whole movie, I was like, shut up, Johnny Depp. You're going to die in a bloodbath.
Well, and the thing is, his real name is Glenn, which need we say more? Like, it's Glenn.
It is Glenn.
So weird.
Hope you get reincarnated as someone who can stay awake for 5 minutes. That's another thing I said a lot.
Yes. I have a comment here, and it's going to go into something I wrote about a lot more, which is I think this mother is the worst mother in all of horror, the worst parent. And I am including 100%. Carrie's mom. But I think she is genuinely the worst parent in any horror movie. Mm-hmm. I hated her so much. At every turn, I was just like, she's so terrible. Mm-hmm. Like, and we'll get to all the reasons, but the first one is when her traumatized daughter's friend's been murdered, and she's like, maybe you don't think murder is serious. And I'm like, shut the fuck up.
No, like, she clearly meant that the fights were not that serious. Like, it was so clearly what she meant. Like, you were just willfully misinterpreting what she's saying.
This is why your husband left you.
Yes.
Also, not to give him too much, the father, I can't believe he was using his daughter as live bait.
I know.
Like, you used me.
For a man that he is convinced is a murderer. Like, just use my daughter to lure out this murderer.
And then he's like, what were we even doing going to school today? Yes. And I'm like, that was your only plan. What was your plan if she'd stayed inside? Also, I like how you're like, my daughter's probably really jumpy because her best friend was murdered and there's a murder on the loose. So I'm going to have these like weird, like Men in Black types follow her.
Yes.
Also, I love when the lesson in class immediately goes to what you're doing. Very 90s, so 80s.
Convenient, yes.
So convenient.
She's a bad teacher because Shakespeare is great and she made it very boring.
Yes, agreed.
Also, they didn't seem to be doing a single play. It was just Shakespeare. It was just a Shakespeare lesson. They weren't, because they talk about two specific plays and like read passages from two different plays. I need to know what her lesson plan is.
Her lesson plan was like one thing, and then a student got murdered, and she's like, well, they probably all need, some kind of way to process this, so I'll just throw all Shakespeare.
Yes.
Can we talk about how convenient it is that Freddie can be in more dream than one a night? Like, how that just makes him like even more ferocious. Mm-hmm. Unfair. Although he seems to only really use it that first night where he's in all their dreams at once. Mm-hmm. But he could be.
They are not nearly concerned enough about they all dreamt about the same guy. Like, I'm sorry, if just you and I dreamt about the same guy, I don't know what I'd do. Like, but I'd be worried.
I'd immediately be like, you need to drive up here because something's about to happen and it's safety in numbers. Because that's just one of those things that they ignore in horror movies that I'm like, you all had nightmares about the same person who doesn't exist. It's not like you all watched a movie and then dreamt about that guy. And it's like, oh yeah, I guess you guys, blah, 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 blah. It's an independent figure you can all describe. Right. And it's clear the guys won't fess up, but they had the dream too. But again, it would only take me and my best friend having that dream to be like, okay, we're in it now.
Yep.
Also, when she goes to visit the boyfriend in jail, he still has blood on his hands. They didn't even let him like wash his girlfriend's blood off him.
Gross.
I was like, that's upsetting.
Yeah. Like,
can you imagine if you were walking around and there was these cute little kids and they're like jump roping and you're doing a little nursery rhyme and it's about Gacy? Because that's the equivalent of what they're doing.
Yes, like, it is.
It's not, he's a real man who murdered children and they don't know that, but you as an adult do. And it's basically like they're singing about Gacy.
Yeah.
I forgot that was a real thing. I thought it was only a rhyme they heard in their dreams. And then when she was like, oh yeah, that old nursery rhyme, I'm like, so you motherfuckers were saying it? They killed your peers. It's not even like this was 100 years ago. They were killing kids. He was killing kids your age. And then some bastard was like, I'm gonna make a nursery rhyme out of this.
Yes. Because it was like, the reverse is also really crazy where it's like, you've got this weird jump rope rhyme about a man who's going to murder you. And then you find out it's based on a real thing, like that happened in your town.
Okay. And also those stay awake pills, they're speed, right? She was taking speed.
That's what I wrote. It was like, yes, the 80s when you could buy amphetamines over the counter.
Yes, it's speed.
She is not taking caffeine pills. She is taking speed.
Yes. Which I guess if I took speed, I could stay awake then too.
Definitely you could.
I guess that wouldn't be, it wouldn't be as much of a trial for me then.
Also, this is, again, jumping ahead, but her secret coffee maker in her room.
I wrote about that too. I wrote about it too. pulled out that mini coffee maker. I was like, me and coffee. Except no one would ever try to stop me from drinking it. But it's like, let's see what the mini coffee maker is brewing today. When she looks at herself and says, God, I look 20 years old.
I was just like, bitch. First of all, no, you don't. You look about 14 still. But also, bitch.
I look 20 years old. What the fuck are you talking about? I also like that she says that and they didn't really put makeup on to make her look any worse. No. So it's even funnier.
She looks exactly the same as she did in all the previous shots.
Her hair's a little frizzier.
Yes.
And that's it. She could have been out in the rain. It's like me coming here and being like, looking at myself and be like, God, I look 32 years old. It's like, it's not that far off from your actual age.
No, also, you're going to be more mature at 20. You're going to look better at 20. Mm-hmm. Like,
she does. We see her at 20 in some of the sequels. That's like right. She just looks more mature. Like your face is still figuring out what it's going to do with itself. Mm-hmm. Oh, this is where I wrote, Robert, that this movie wouldn't be without him. Why did I write scary? Oh, that this is like a scary thriller. Like, it's not like it has these thriller aspects that I really enjoy. I'd fall asleep.
I would definitely fall asleep. And also, we need to talk about how much I hate that bathtub shot. I hate it so much.
I knew you would. I was like, oh, God.
Like, and obviously I knew that I've seen this movie several times. I knew it was there. But like every time I see it, I'm just like, very few things make me close my legs faster than that scene.
But it's also a weirdly sexual scene, which again, they never say that he does anything, which if he killed children, like, right. And then that's different than she's prepubescent. So it doesn't, she's post-pubescent, not prepubescent. There we go. That's how. So that wouldn't make as much sense. Although to be perfectly honest, I am totally fine with them keeping him as just a child murderer, like 100% with them not like making that anymore. Can we talk about like, have you ever been to a funeral where the person giving the funeral is kind of talking shit about the dead? Because I have. And
of course you have, and you're really, a weird town.
Really uncomfortable. Like it was not, I will say this was not a Jewish funeral.
I never thought it was.
But, and I won't go into any more detail than that, but it was definitely something where I was like, the fuck is happening? And I was young and I was like, even I was like, oh, wow, like, nah. But he was basically talking shit. He's like, judge not, yes, ye be judged. But then he's like, but I'm going to judge. I'm like, that's all you were doing. All you were doing before you said those words was being a judgmental prick. And then you're like, but we really shouldn't judge. Like, you shouldn't, but I can. God says it's okay.
He's Catholic.
Yes.
Also, again, remember in Catholicism, the priest is a direct line to God. He's allowed to do and say whatever
he wants. God, I did forget that.
Never, ever forget that.
They're a direct line to God.
I don't know. Maybe they've kind of moved away from that in more recent times, but that was a big part of
this is
why Martin Luther broke away from the church. So
this is pre like Boston and all that kind of stuff coming out. So that would have been a far more like, I don't know if it's changed. I just know people have a very different belief system when it comes to that. The denial in these parents is excruciating. I know we talk about it. We've talked about it a lot this season, but she's describing the man you killed.
Yes.
She has no way.
That's why she's the worst, because like, going back, like the whole time she knows it's true and she just does nothing but gaslight her daughter the whole time.
I was going to say, people throw the word gaslight around a lot these days, but this is it. This movie is gaslighting because she knows she's describing a real man who did murder children and is like, oh, it's just a dream. Also, does she want her daughter to die? Because she just keeps trying to force her to sleep. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, It's so messed up. And then when she pulls that fucking hat out of nowhere, yes. She's like, I don't know where you got that hat. I'm like, is this what it's like to hate your parents? Because I was raised by reasonable people who never would have like done this. And so I know there are people who have like normal conversations with their parents where they're like, Mom, Dad, this, and it's not even about a ghost hat. And they're like, no, because they, and I'm like, I can't imagine what it would be like to be like, I literally pulled this hat out of thin air, out of my dream. Like, I don't know where you got that hat. I was unconscious and you were watching me. Where the fuck do you think I got that hat?
You brought her in. Like, you know, she didn't have anything when she went to sleep.
No, and all of this is just in big, bold letters, me being like, you know whose hat that is. Like, you know what's going on. And I have no sympathy because this is your daughter. Children are dying again. And you didn't do a good fucking job of killing him the first time. Like, you clearly messed something up and he ended up in some weird dream realm, which I know they probably explain in the later movies. I don't need it explained. It's a curse. Like, it's a curse. And you should be helping your daughter because, like, also, I know Rachel and I will be very much on the same page. If I burned to death a man who murdered children and got off on technicality, I'd sleep like a baby.
I know, right?
I would not develop. I think it's implied that that's why they got divorced and why she's an alcoholic. And I'm like, why though? I would just sit around drinking wine being like, hey, remember when we murdered that guy who totally had it coming?
You know what I wouldn't do is keep the evidence in my house, though. Wouldn't do that.
Yes.
Definitely wouldn't do that part.
I took his knives.
And then I threw them to the bottom of the lake. Like, you didn't
even need to throw them to the bottom of the lake. No one, it looks like, was willing to investigate what happened. Yeah, because the cops were involved. He's the sheriff. Like, it was a town police coming together to straight up murder this man justifiably. And like when she's talking about it and she's like, the lawyers got rich and the judge got famous, but in the end, someone forgot to sign. Like, that whole thing, I'm like, stop talking like that. Like, stop it.
Stop.
But no, I'm like, you need to stop. But yeah, she's saying that she's delusional. And I'm like, but you know she's not. And honestly, she should have thrown that bottle of vodka in your face.
Right.
She literally says to her, there's something wrong with you. And I wrote, you're the worst parent in horror.
Also, it's funny that you bring up the alcohol because I wrote down drinking might act like, because she gets into that fight with her mom. She's like, well, then maybe I should just get really loaded. Maybe that would help. And I'm like, actually, it might, because alcohol suppresses whatever like hormone it is that sends you into REM sleep. So like you could get some sleep, but you'd be less likely to dream. So like, this is one of the rare situations where getting drunk might be the answer.
That might have been the solution all the time. Well, now there are some, there are drugs now you can take that can suppress REM. Like, you shouldn't, but there are drugs you're not trying to do it, but there are drugs that sometimes that's a side effect. So it's like, she had options. Oh my God, the bars on the window, psychotic.
I know. And like, they had those like cute little curly things on them. And like, you can dress them up however you want. There's still bars on a window.
But also,
and then she locked the door from the outside.
Fire
and
hazard.
Threw away the key. That's exactly what I said. I wrote in all caps, fire hazard. And then the house did catch on fire and she couldn't get out.
Because she wanted her daughter to die. That's the only conclusion I can come to this. Well, the other thing is, I don't really understand her logic with the bars on the window, because if you think your daughter's crazy, why do you need bars on the window? I understand destroying the lattice, but if you think and locking the door, but if you think your daughter's crazy, why do you need bars on the window? What are you protecting her from? And if you do believe her, bars aren't going to do shit because he attacks in your dreams, you dumb bitch. I hate her more than Freddie. I think I hate her more than Freddie. Like, I mean, he's a crazy murderer, but at least he's upfront about it.
Exactly. It's that Dolores Umbridge effect where it's like, you're worse than Voldemort. Like,
yes. He really is serving looks though with that hat. Like, he's like, this is my look. I have this sweater, this hat. It's iconic. Also, he only went with one hand with the finger knives, which I think is interesting. Like, he made a lot of choices, a lot of aesthetic choices.
Well, I imagine the finger knives are a lot like having acrylic nails, and it's like you really lose your dexterity.
The other hand.
Yeah, he needs the other hand to grab things.
I wrote to grab children. I wrote security in quotes, and then I wrote just fuck her, seriously.
Yes.
And then she's just like, oh, when they go down to the basement and she tells her the worst story in history and then is like, you can sleep now.
Thanks, Mom.
Mommy killed him. But do you not hear what I'm saying? Bitch, he's appearing in our dreams. Oh my God. Like, I would just be losing my mind at that point. Also, why can't she stay with her father? Why can't she call him and be like, Mom is a drunk and she's lost her mind?
Mm-hmm.
When she pulls out the tiny coffee maker. This is where I wrote, if I had killed him, I wouldn't be losing any sleep. Which I guess, like, we don't know who else besides her parents participated. I guess the assumption is all the parents of the kids he killed, which if that's so, then none of the others are losing any sleep over it. So maybe she was always terrible because they all seem to be fairly normal. But like there have to be other people who were involved in this. And I would assume I guess they could have been the parents of the murdered children. And she participated because she was the sheriff's wife. So maybe they don't know. But you have to think everyone in town knows that it was done intentionally.
Right.
Like, there's no way.
I always assumed that it was the parents of the kids who were murdered, because I assumed it was a revenge thing.
And also, like, I also had thought she was involved, that it could be prevention, because you know he's not going to stop and you know he's going to kill more of your children. Like, he killed 20. Mm-hmm. That's so many kids to be killed and not be caught. Mm-hmm. I know it's the 80s, so they probably thought a couple of those kids went to like the city to get work or like ran away, or all the terrible, terrible things the police would tell parents in the 80s. But eventually they had to, figure out some of these kids were somewhere else. Like, that's the thing. I sort of want a prequel more than I wanted.
Right.
Like, I kind of want a prequel, although it couldn't focus on them because I don't want to get involved with people I know are going to become terrible parents. But maybe some of the parents of kids who've disappeared, who they know their kid didn't run away because they're 6.
I do love mob justice in a movie exclusively, because in real life it's never justice. It's just nonsense. But
I feel like you could have gotten Robert Engel. He would play the character. He would have, like, if they'd been like, we're gonna do a sequel instead, he'd have been game.
Yeah.
He's down. That's the thing, is that, like, I can't tell you the names of a lot of the other actors who play the big name horror antagonists, but I know his because he's always been very, like, he's just about it in a real way. Like, he knows how iconic this character is and how many people, like, see him that way and love it. And he's very personable about it, like, whereas, and I guess you can see his face, but his face is all scars. So like, I don't really know how much that has to do with it. I just know that he's the only one who I really know of the big ones.
No, I don't know the other ones.
She homed alone her house.
She did. She sure did. I loved that.
And then I wrote, it's her useless mother passed out in the living room. And no, she put her mother to bed, which she had 20 minutes. And in 10 minutes, which first of all, I think even if I hadn't slept for a year, I don't think I'd be able to fall asleep in 20 minutes. Rachel knows which we're going to get to when we start doing the stories, is there's going to be a part where Rachel and I talk about our dreams and our ability to sleep, because I think that's interesting to what I'm talking about. But it took her 10 minutes maybe she just was. I mean,
she hadn't slept for, I think, 7
days.
Yeah.
But she also had all that coffee and caffeine pills. So I don't know. She was able to fall asleep very quickly, is just what I'm saying.
Well, and she would have gone straight into REM sleep for the most part, because like when you don't get enough sleep, your body kind of skips out on that delta wave sleep and goes to REM sleep, because it prioritizes that over, like repairing your body and stuff.
I will say this. It was a great plan. She's really smart. Like, it was a really good plan.
It was. It's just, again, Johnny Depp, hopefully you get reincarnated as someone who can stay awake for 5 minutes.
Insane. His murder is insane.
I know.
Like, the bed eats him, and then I don't even know, because like that whole room being covered in blood is just insane. Mm-hmm. What in the fuck even like happened with the mom? Like, what in the fuck?
The bed ate her, and then it was just fine. And then it was just done. It was very similar to Johnny Depp's death, except without the blood geyser.
Okay. So we're going to play a little game.
Okay.
So imagine, sorry, that's a weird way to start it, but basically the end, the very end. Pretend there are no sequels. What do you think happens at the end?
Honestly, I have never known. I remember the first time I watched it being like, I like turned to my father and I was like, Dad, what the hell was that? Like, I have never known what that is.
No, me neither. And I don't think you're necessarily supposed to, but it's like, it goes from the idea that like, he's a dream demon and she can turn her back on him and take away his power. And then which I actually love as a way to vanquish him. It's like bullying him to death.
Yes, that's what I wrote.
But
bullied him to death.
Yes. And so just like ignoring him, you know, to stop those monsters. 1, 2, 3.
How many Treehouse of Horror episodes can we reference in this episode?
But it doesn't make sense what doesn't make sense to me is the idea that she would have been able to reset everything, which is what the end implies. Right. But it's even more dreamy. So she's clearly in a dream, but is it a real dream? Is it a Freddy dream? You don't really know. I mean, I guess like my theories would be it didn't work and he was just screwing with her, or it worked, but in sort of a way where like, this isn't reality either, but it's a world where everyone's alive and where her mother's going to get sober. And so it's almost like she's entered sort of a fantasy. But then it becomes a nightmare. Right. I don't know. That's the thing. Like, I don't know. Like the idea that Freddy just never went away and this was just her dream. It just like, it seems weird in the context of how the story flows. If like, yes, if it ended and she went to bed and then woke up and her family was there, her mom was there and her friends were there, I'd be like, oh, like Freddy really wasn't gone and this is a dream. But like it's always felt very odd to me. I've always wondered if there was like a missing scene or something, but it's always been very odd to me, especially since if you do want to bring the sequels, then it becomes more confusing because we know she's not dead. Right. So the end can't be that Freddy wasn't vanquished and then went after her because she's not dead. So no idea.
No clue.
More movie thoughts?
Nope.
Okay, so I'm dead. Are you dead?
The deadest.
I mean, there's a small chance Rachel and I could realize we're dreaming about the same guy and do the plan and then hope that whoever is up stays awake. I'd honestly rather go into the dream and bring him out and have the responsibility of staying awake be Rachel's.
Okay, I think that's fair.
And I'll bring him out. You also would then have to hit him with a bat. I mean, I'll hit him with a bat too when I get out, but you'll have to hit him with a bat.
I want to hit him with the bat. But no, we're like, and this is going into, apparently we're going to talk about our dreams and stuff later, but I have very bad dream recall. So the chances of us figuring out that we're dreaming about the same guy are very, very slim because.
Well, we can go into that right now. So I'm going to talk about sleep paralysis, guys. And it's going to lead into Rachel's thing. But I also want to talk a little bit. Don't worry, this isn't about me and Rachel describing our dreams. But it is.
So it was my house, but it wasn't really my house. And like, oh, this person there was there. Like, okay, I'm done with this bit.
Okay, so as Rachel has just said, Rachel really doesn't recall her dreams very often and not in a ton of detail, correct?
Correct.
And I am the exact opposite. I'm an extremely vivid dreamer. I'm an extremely lucid dreamer. I dream every night. It's multiple vignettes. I remember them. It's awesome. But also goes with it is the fact that I have a lot of trouble sleeping. So I'm basically live in REM a lot because I don't really hit deep sleep, which is why I do this. So it's fun, but it's also because I have some kind of like sleep issue. I've always been an extremely light sleeper. I sleep with a mask on. I've never really been able to do anything about the noise because earplugs have always bothered me. I think I have very, very tiny ears on the inside. So it's like, I don't know. I also can't
small and
I also can't wear some headphones. You also can feel them. Like I don't feel my eye mask. Like it's just like,
you stop feeling them after a while. I used earplugs at work there for a while because I was getting screamed at and everything.
Rachel's like, and now I can't hear you, children.
Well, one of my supervisors was like, "Hey, do you want some earplugs?" And I was like, "Yes." And it was very nice because I was not getting my eardrums damaged anymore. And then like later I would forget that I was wearing them. So like you got to give it some time.
You can still hear something, can't you?
You can hear, it's just muffled.
Yeah, I've always found that to be almost more annoying. Like, it's like when you can hear a TV, but not enough to know what they're saying, but enough to almost hear what they're saying. That's the worst. I'm like, you either got to turn it up or down because I either need to be able to, my brain isn't trying to figure out what they're saying. But I'm very light sleeper. And so because of that, I dream very, very vividly and remember my dreams. I dream in color and can usually, it's not like I can lucid dream them in the sense of what you'd see on TV where it's like, I know I'm dreaming and now I'm a movie star. It's more like I can actively make decisions and change things and be like, nope, don't like that one bit, like not going over there.
See, and like because I'm on Lexapro now, like one of the side effects is more vivid dreams. So I do occasionally remember them and I get to the point where like there are moments where I'm like, there's a part of my brain that's like, that's weird. But then I just move on. Or like, you know how if you're reading something, it'll change every time you look at it. I can feel myself in the dream getting frustrated because I'm like, wait, what did that say? And I go back to read it and it says something different. And I'm like, what is happening right now?
I travel in most of my dreams, like legitimately like have to wait at the airport because my dreams are that. Do you know how many dreams of mine take place partially waiting to check? Like, because I'm going somewhere, but I have to physically get there. So I have to go to the airport.
I love that so much.
Like, even my subconscious can't even be like, we're going to start this off at the resort. It's like, we have to travel there first, or I have to have a discussion with someone of how I got there. Like, I'm very concerned with how I got places.
There's a lot of exposition in your dreams.
There's a lot of exposition in my dreams. I'm just glad that I've, for the most part, stopped having the dreams where I'm driving and just drive up on the curb. And it's not that anything gets hurt. It's just that I damage a lot of property. And then I'm like, how am I going to pay for all of this? You see, it's not that interesting. It's not like when people are like, oh, you remember all your dreams. I'm like, yes, but like, why though? Like I could remember I have a really good memory, but I'm still like, why though? The amount of times I dream that I'm in high school, but I don't know what my classes are. And I know the exam's coming up. And then I'm literally sitting there and I'm like, I have a master's degree. Like, why am I here? And I can't and then I'm just like, I should leave. Like, why does this matter? I already did this. Why do I have to figure out which class is next or take a math test? But yeah, so we both have different relationships with dreams and stuff, but thankfully, neither of us have experienced sleep paralysis. And I think at this point, the likelihood we will is very, very small, and I'll explain why. So let's start off with just straight up. They don't know why it happens. They don't know how to treat it. I'm going to list a bunch of different things they tell you could cause them and a bunch of different things they tell you could treat it. But they don't really fucking know why it happens. They just know when it happens. And they know like some characteristics of what is physically happening to you. And for people who don't know, sleep paralysis is when you are between conscious and unconscious. So the way they say it is you either are just waking up or just falling asleep, and your body is paralyzed, because your body does become paralyzed when you dream, when you enter realm. That's why you don't hurt yourself, even if it's also feel why like you're fighting.
It's why you don't pee your pants when you have those dreams where you really have to pee.
Yes. Which I'm sort of all over the place right now, but there is a name for it and it's in my notes somewhere. But basically what happens is your body and your mind haven't caught up yet. So your body's paralyzed the way that it would be in a dream, which is why you can't move. But you are conscious. So your eyes are open and you can't speak, but you can hear and you can see. And depending on what you hear and see, and it depends what you can hear and see. A lot of people have full on hallucinations, both auditory and visual, and you can't move and you can't let anyone know what's happening. And it's a living nightmare. Literally, that's what it is. So about 8% of the general population have them. You have hallucinations. So a lot of times it comes along with the feeling of being suffocated, which we'll get to. you either it's connected to REM, but again, they don't really know. They're like, it's connected to REM because it's like dreams, but it's like your body isn't fully aware that you're awake yet or asleep yet. So it's like you're both. Like something has gone wrong. And a lot of scientists think that's to do with the amygdala, that like something's gone wrong with the chemicals it's giving off. And so you are stuck basically. So yes. And it's atonia is what they call the state where your body just completely paralyzes you so that you don't hurt yourself or pee yourself or anything like that. So it is meant to protect you. But in these stages, the wires get crossed. They call it a mixed state of consciousness. So 75% involve images that are not associated with normal dreams. So that's the thing. So if I all of a sudden woke up and I was in an airport trying to get somewhere, I would be like, oh, this is one of my dreams. I dream about this all the time. Like, yeah, when does my flight land? This is a dream. But it's that 75% of them, they're not things you ever see in dreams. So you aren't like, oh, this is a dream. So there are three main types. Intruder hallucinations, which are that something or someone is in your room and something's there, and that's obviously terrifying. Then there is the chest pressure ones, or they call them the incubi. So it's basically that like you feel like a creature, it usually is subhuman, is choking or suffocating you and is on your chest. So you have that feeling of suffocation.
Sitting on your chest.
Yes. Just in some way is on you or doing something to you. And then there's motor hallucinations, which is you feel, these always to me seem like they'd be the least distressing, where they just feel, it feels like you're flying or feels like you're moving in some way. Like you feel like you're physically moving, which I'd prefer over either of the others I described. 90% of these dreams or these states are associated with fear. Only 10% are blissful. And we're going to get to it, I guess right now. I just keep saying that. But like basically a lot of times how people feel about sleep paralysis is cultural. So let's break that down a little bit. So in Canadian Inuit culture, they attribute it to spells being cast by shaman. Japanese folklore says it's vengeful spirits trying to suffocate their enemies. In Brazilian folklore, there's a demon that has a name. It's Pisadaria, Portuguese for she who steps, and it's a crone with long nails who's trying to kill you. And then in Denmark, they're treated as completely benign. So people aren't like, there's nothing with them as far as fear. Whereas in Egypt, they have historically an overwhelming sense of like dread and death. Like they're an omen of death. So there is this idea that how your culture perceives them is how you're going to feel. Like they said they did a study at one point and in Mexico, and like most of the youth knew about what sleep paralysis was, and they sort of knew it based on the intruder. And a lot of them had experienced it. And so it's the idea that like it happens, but if your culture doesn't talk about it, you don't really know what's happening to you. And if it's something where it's like, oh yeah, this happens and it's a demon trying to murder you, you're obviously more terrified than if it's like, whatever, that's just something that happens. Like, you know, wake up, go to bed, you know. So it can last for a few seconds or 20 minutes.
Oof, that's too long.
The average is 6 to 7 minutes, and most people just wake up on their own. There's some people who say that like you need to focus on your toes and focus on moving your toes, and then it'll wake up the rest of your body. It can occur at any age, but it usually starts between 7 and 25 years old. And then you start having them more frequently when you're in your 20s and 30s. So it would be very late onset if any of us were to get them. So the causes are unknown, and they're associated with basically anything and everything bad, but I'm still going to do the list. Sleep apnea, having a hard time falling asleep, excessive daydreaming, your circadian rhythm not being aligned with the local day and night cycle, like from jet lag, anxiety disorders, PTSD, stopping drinking or stopping antidepressants, and lucid dreams and vivid daydreams, which together we have a lot of the things on those lists, but we don't. We've skated past it. I just thought this was funny because like my sources were Nova from PBS, Healthline, and then the Sleep Foundation. Mm-hmm. And one of them was like, most of them aren't serious. Only 10% are really the kind where they're like, people are like scarred or in danger. And I'm like, 90% aren't serious to who? To you? I'm like, I would consider this to be serious if it ever happened. Uh-huh. Is it only serious if I somehow physically, like, I don't know how you would because you're paralyzed, but I guess like maybe they consider them only serious if they are the ones that last longer. Can you imagine 20 minutes just thinking a demon sitting in a chair in your room?
No, I really, really can't.
At a certain point, it must almost be like, is he going to do something? Like it's been 20 minutes. Like that's an average, which means some people it's longer. And what if it just doesn't do anything? What if it's just there? Like you're afraid at first, but like if it was 20 minutes and all it did was sit there, wouldn't you sort of be like, okay,
I guess we're friends now.
Like, are you looking for someone else? Or are you just like waiting for something? Like, so the treatments are basically to clean up your sleep hygiene, as they call it. So it's all the kind of things they tell you to do if you don't sleep well, which is make sure you have a good mattress and pillow, set up a strict routine for your sleep, no screens or electronics for the first 30 minutes before you fall asleep at least, limiting alcohol and caffeine. But then there's also like CBT or therapy, which I just don't think therapy would help. Like, I think therapy would help most things, but this seems extremely biological.
I mean, I think the therapy would probably be to teach you relaxation techniques so that when it does happen, you're not in such like physiological or emotional distress. Like, but I don't know how that's going to make it stop happening.
Most people see a faceless, shapeless presence trying to suffocate them. Mm-hmm. Some describe seeing a haggard figure with claws. Some people, it's dead relatives, which I hope the dead relatives aren't trying to suffocate them. So a lot of times it's distortion of things that are there. Like the light of a clock will turn into a red eye. A pile of clothes on a chair will be a demon. Like it's that like normal things will morph into. Right. So it's not like you're not seeing anything. It's that you're not seeing what you think you're seeing.
Right.
In Turkey, it's a supernatural figure and it has a wide brimmed hat. And in order to stop it,
you have to knock the hat off, don't you?
You have to steal the hat. You have to steal his hat.
I love that.
So the Nightmare is a painting. We'll post it on our Instagram from 1781. Henry, I think it's Facili. And it's thought to depict what sleep paralysis feels like. It's like a demon in your room. The Nightmare, 1781.
Oh, yeah, I know this painting.
Yes.
Yeah.
The last thing I'm going to say is that in 1876, it was like founded or discovered, but then the very next sentences were like, that was just the first time that someone with a psychology degree started talking about it. Cultures have been talking about it. And I was like, I don't care to listen to you anymore. You didn't discover something in 1876. You just gave it a mainstream name, but all these cultures knew what it was before you.
Yes, that's where the incubus and the succubus come from.
Yes.
Like, that's literally what they are, is sleep paralysis. Like, every single culture has this idea and like some sort of folklore associated with it, which dovetails very nicely into my story, which is the direct inspiration for this. My sources are some LA Times articles, a New York Times article, history.com, and The Atlantic. Sometime in the late 1970s, the first article I found was from February 1981. They wrote like, there was just like this rash of men who were from the Hmong ethnic group in Laos, who like were all living in the United States, just dying in their sleep. Like they were all healthy, didn't have heart problems, but like basically at some point while they were asleep, their heart just stopped. And the name that we have for this now is sudden arrhythmic death syndrome, which just means it's kind of like SIDS in babies. It's like we have no idea what causes it, but all of a sudden, like while people are sleeping, they just die. But the story that they open with is Yong Lang Tao, who, like I said, was a Hmong refugee living in the United States. He just died in his sleep. He was 47 years old, totally healthy. At some point in the night, his wife woke up and noticed that he was struggling to breathe. And at a certain point, he just stopped breathing. And the coroner was like, this is the second time in 3 days that this has happened. Same ethnic group and everything. So he goes to some other coroners and finds that in the past 9 months, there have been 4 total cases of this just in the Seattle area. I think this was in Seattle. I didn't write that down. So this was February 1981. Since 1978, there have been 13 total deaths like this, and all of them were Laotian refugees. So by May of that year, the CDC starts to investigate this because it's now gone up to a total of 18, which means there are 5 more between February and May. 17 of them are men. There is 1 woman. Every single one of them is from the Hmong ethnic group, and almost all of them are refugees. They are finding some sort of cardiac arrhythmia, which just means your heart's not beating properly. It's an arrhythmic beating, but they can't explain it. And then by July of that year, we're up to 20 deaths. And it all sounds like not a whole lot, but this accounts for about half of the deaths of Hmong refugees in the United States in that time period.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's only 20 people across several years, but it's not a huge subset of the population, And again, this is all in less than one. Oh, no, wait, this is 20 all in less than 1 year, which again accounts for about half of all the deaths of this ethnic group. So this is the point where we back up and we get to the secret villain in this story. Meg, would you like to guess who the secret villain of this story is?
Racism?
Kind of.
Capitalism.
You're getting closer.
Big pharma.
Nope, you're getting farther away.
It's not.
Do you know where Laos is?
I don't. I'm bad at geography. I don't.
Okay. It's by Vietnam. Now, do you want to guess who the secret villain is?
Oh, it's us. It's us.
It's American imperialism. It's America. So the reason that we have we don't have a ton of Laotian refugees, but many of the Laotians living in the United States are from the Hmong tribe because during the Vietnam War, first of all, Laos did get bombed while we were bombing Vietnam and Cambodia, but they were also trying to overthrow a communist government in Laos, less publicly than they were in Vietnam. And the Hmong were made up a big group of the local soldiers fighting with the United States. And in 1975, the communist regime won and then started exterminating, the people who fought with the United States. So they fled the United States, many by way of Thailand and other countries, because you know how we are with refugees. We also did, just a little statistic here. They died at 10 times the rate that US soldiers did fighting that war.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So something that I don't know a whole lot about, but I feel like we should know this. But we really disrupted the immigration patterns of how they came over to the United States. We split them up and sent them to 53 different cities. I don't know how much people generally know about how immigration works, but usually if there are a bunch of people from one specific area, they tend to settle in a similar area because you have
community.
So yes, community and someone who knows how to navigate the system who helps you move along. That's why there are Chinatowns in a lot of big cities, because they all they know people and they end up moving to the same place. But our immigration system disrupted that and sent them all across the United States, which then did lead to a second migration. So there are larger populations in Los Angeles, Seattle, Portland, and the St. Paul, Minneapolis area. So obviously they're trying to figure out what causes this. And again, to this day, we have no idea. But at the time, they're maybe stress is killing them, which it's probably a contributing factor. Being a refugee, I think, is pretty stressful, but you can't measure it. There was an idea that it was a lingering effect of all the nerve agents that got used during the war. But most coroners didn't think that was it because they're like, that's not really how nerve agents work, and we're not finding any traces of toxins in their system. So again, that crosses off the other types of toxins they thought might be causing it. There might be some genetic factors, like there does seem to be, like this particular arrhythmia does seem to be more common in this ethnic group, but we can't figure out like why this arrhythmia causes some people to just suddenly die in their sleep. And that's where we get into the Atlantic article. Shelley Adler is a PhD. She studies like medical anthropology. I don't know what like she's actually a professor of, but she did some research about this like back in 2011. And her hypothesis is that it's a combination of sleep paralysis and then this genetic cardiac arrhythmia. So we discussed what sleep paralysis is, and I mentioned every culture has some folklore that goes along with it, and like a monster kind of that goes along with it. Or I guess this one might not have a monster going along with it, but in this ethnic group, among the Hmong, it's known as the Sog Suam, which I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but I'm doing my best. And they believe that this type of sleep paralysis is caused by like not worshiping properly or not properly honoring their ancestors. And basically when they're not worshiping properly, their ancestor spirits don't want to protect them. And there was a belief that because they all fled, they didn't really honor their ancestors correctly. And the kicker is that when you start having this kind of like sleep paralysis, you need a shaman to perform a ritual to kind of set everything right. And because I mentioned with this refugee pattern, this immigration pattern that we fucked up, it's very hard to find a shaman. So her argument is that the sleep paralysis and the beliefs surrounding the sleep paralysis was killing them. And she goes into a lot of things like, it's actually called the nocebo effect, which is like the placebo effect, but it's like this idea that a bad thing is going to happen. So like basically, since they believe it can kill them, it does, which I thought was a really interesting argument. But at the end of the day, we don't know. And as far as I know, it's not like still happening. But yeah, this was the direct inspiration. Wes Craven read a story. I think the bit that I read said that he was describing the sleep paralysis of a Cambodian refugee, but then also all of these people dying in their sleep, which I should mention, I didn't get into it as much. It wasn't just this specific ethnic group that just like suddenly died in their sleep. We saw it in a lot of Southeast Asian populations living in the United States. There's a whole bunch of research in Japan about it as well. Like it happens there too. So it happens like across racial and ethnic groups, but this specific story was the direct inspiration for A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Well, from what I went over with sleep paralysis, they would hit a lot of the things that is said to believe to cause it. Like their circadian rhythms are probably messed up depending on where they were put, where they were sent to. They have PTSD. And then it's like I talked about, how your culture sees them can be how you are influenced. They also, I didn't mention it, I just forgot, but a lot of people who have them from America, they see aliens.
Of course we do.
So that's what we see. And so like there is that cultural aspect. So scary stuff.
I know, right?
Still think Freddy's scarier.
Yes. Because he's actively out to get you.
Yes. Okay, guys. So this is it. This is the end of season 2. And I'm going to say some things. The first thing I want to do is give all of our love and thanks to Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Because Matt is amazing, and we wouldn't be able to. If you've heard the sound quality go up this season, it's because of Matt. Because Matt's agreed to sit here while me and Rachel go on and just like just do this podcast, but also like talk beforehand and afterhand and all that. And it has really brought everything up for him to be recording it on his good stuff, and he edits it. So he's amazing, and you should check out his stuff, which is linked. It will be linked on this finale. And we just want to thank all of you for listening and for liking our Instagram and our Facebook post and reviewing and giving stars or whatever mode you listen to the podcast, and just for finding it, because I know I've talked to a lot of people where like, again, because of the algorithms and stuff, True Horrors doesn't always come right up. So you got to scroll a little. And I appreciate that you do that y'all scroll to find us. Rachel and I love to do this podcast. The first season was a lot more of a trial, whereas now I think we've got it down. But we love it. And so I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. And, please, if you want to support us, share some of our stuff onto your Facebook, let people know about it, because word of mouth is really what gets podcasts around. And then if you have any suggestions, anything you want to see or hear for season 3, go on our Facebook, go on our Instagram. Let us know if there's a movie that you're like, oh, the 2 seasons are down and they haven't done this one. Let us know about it. Like, we'd be happy to take those kind of requests. And we just really appreciate all of you listening.
Very much. That was beautiful, Meg. Good work.
Thank you. All right. Well, this closes out season 2 for all of us here at True Horrors. We thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.